She thought she knew where she came from. Raised with love by the man she proudly called Dad, she never questioned her roots. But one ordinary afternoon, a simple DNA test, taken just for fun, shattered everything she believed about her own life. How do you rebuild your identity when the foundation was never what you thought it was? This is the story of Emily, and the truth hidden deep in her blood. Emily had always felt a deep connection with her father, Richard. He was the man who tucked her in every night, who cheered the loudest at her school recitals, who taught her how to ride a bike, and later how to stand back up after life knocked her down. Their bond was unshakable, or so she believed. Still, there were moments, quiet ones, when a faint voice inside her whispered that something didn't quite add up. She brushed it off, convinced it was just overthinking. After all, families come in all shapes and forms, and hers had always felt whole. But then came the question that sparked everything. One of those social media challenges, encouraging people to take a DNA test to discover your ancestry. Emily thought it would be fun. She'd always been curious about her roots, and maybe, just maybe, she'd find out if the family stories about having a drop of Scottish blood were true. She ordered the kit online and laughed as she spit into the tube, never imagining that what would come back would shake her to the core. Weeks passed, and the thought of the test drifted into the background of her busy life. Emily was working full-time as a nurse, juggling long shifts and caring for her patients. Her evenings were filled with takeout dinners, calls with friends, and FaceTimes with her dad, Richard, now retired, living a few states away. Then, one evening, the notification arrived. Your DNA results are ready. She clicked the email with excitement, but as she scrolled, her heart began to pound. The percentages and ethnic backgrounds didn't align with what she'd always believed, but more shocking than that, under close family matches, a name appeared, one she didn't recognize. The app labeled him as Parent 99.999% match. Her stomach dropped. Richard's name wasn't there, no trace, no shared DNA, nothing. At first, she assumed it was a mistake. Maybe the test was wrong. Maybe there had been a mix-up. But as she cross-referenced details, as she double-checked her raw data, the reality began to set in. The man who had raised her, who had given her everything, was not her biological father. The revelation tore through her like a storm. She sat in silence, the weight of it sinking in. Her identity, her family story, her sense of self, everything felt suddenly unstable. She remembered birthdays, family vacations, moments where Richard had looked at her with pride. Was any of it real? Did he know? Tears filled her eyes, not from anger, but from confusion. Love, after all, isn't defined by biology. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that a part of her story was missing, a puzzle piece long lost, waiting to be found. And so, she made a decision. She needed to know the truth. She would find out who her biological father was. Emily sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, her fingers trembling slightly as she zoomed in on the name that had appeared in her DNA results. James Whitmore, a man she had never heard of, listed as her biological parent. His profile photo showed a man in his early 60s with piercing green eyes, eyes that looked a lot like hers. She clicked into his profile. The app offered only a few details: approximate age, location, and the message button. Emily stared at it, heart pounding in her ears. Who was this man? And how was he her biological father? She didn't message him, not yet. She needed answers first. And there was only one person who might know the truth. That night, she called her mom. The conversation started gently. Emily asked about old family stories, about her birth, about what her mom remembered from those early days. But her mom's voice grew quiet, almost defensive. When Emily mentioned the DNA test and the name James Whitmore, Silence followed. Then her mother whispered, "Emily, I always knew this day might come." And the truth unraveled. Her mother explained that years before Emily was born, during a difficult time in her marriage, she had met someone. It was brief, complicated. She never told Richard, the man who raised Emily, because he had welcomed the pregnancy with open arms. "He loved you from the moment he saw you," her mother said, tears in her voice. "To him, you were always his daughter." Emily sat in silence, a tidal wave of emotions crashing over her. She wasn't angry, not exactly, but she felt disoriented, as if the foundation of her life had shifted under her feet. She looked back at her laptop. James Whitmore. That name now carried the weight of truth, of mystery, of family. She began researching. A quick search revealed that James lived in Oregon, 1,000 miles away. He was a retired firefighter, involved in local charities, a grandfather. Emily scrolled through news clippings and social media profiles, absorbing every detail. The more she read, the more real he became. But one question lingered. Did he know about her? And if not, what would he say when he found out he had a daughter he never knew existed? The next day, Emily drafted a message. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, deleting, rewriting, trying to find the perfect words. "Hi, James. This might come as a surprise, but I recently took a DNA test and discovered that we share a very close connection. I'd like to talk, if you're open to it." She read it over and over again. Then, with a deep breath, she hit send. The message was delivered, and then nothing. Silence. Hours passed, then a day, then two. Emily checked the app obsessively, hoping for a sign. Her thoughts raced. Did he read it? Was he shocked, angry, in denial? On the third day, a reply came. "Hello, Emily. I don't know what to say. I've never taken a DNA test, but I did know your mother many years ago. If what you're saying is true, then I want to talk. Please, let's connect." Tears filled Emily's eyes. She stared at the message, knowing that everything was about to change. The truth had broken free, and now, the journey to find her real father had truly begun. Emily sat at her desk, staring at the blinking cursor on her screen as she drafted her first real message to James. Her heart was a tangled mess of curiosity, fear, and cautious hope. Every part of her life had been turned upside down, yet something deep within her urged her forward, the need to know who she truly was and where she really came from. She typed slowly, deliberately, pouring her heart into the message. "Hi, James. I know this must be overwhelming. It is for me, too. I'm not reaching out to disrupt your life. I just want to understand. I was raised by a wonderful man who I will always call Dad, but I never knew there was another piece of my story out there, until now." James replied just hours later. "I appreciate your message. I've had a hard time sleeping since I got your first note. I've been going through old memories, trying to make sense of this. Your mother, she and I had a brief relationship, but I never knew there was a child. I want to talk more, if you're ready." They agreed to set up a video call. Emily was nervous. She put on a plain blue sweater, did her makeup carefully but subtly, and stared at the reflection in her laptop screen. Would he see himself in her face? Would she see her future in his eyes? The screen blinked to life. James appeared, older than the photo, with gentle eyes, silver hair, and a voice that carried the weight of surprise and emotion. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then James whispered, "You look so much like my mother." That single sentence unraveled something inside Emily. The wall she had held up for days began to crumble. They talked for over an hour. James shared stories from his youth, how he had worked in fire rescue for over 30 years, how he'd met Emily's mother at a community fundraiser, how their time together was brief but meaningful. He spoke with regret, but also with tenderness. Emily, in turn, spoke of Richard, the man who had raised her. She made it clear that she wasn't searching for a replacement, just understanding. In the days that followed, Emily began to piece together the missing fragments of her story. She found old photos online of James in uniform, standing tall beside his firehouse crew. She discovered that he had 2 adult children from a later marriage, her half-siblings. Their names were Daniel and Laura. That realization came with another wave of fear. Would they accept her? Would they even want to meet? James encouraged her to write to them. "I'll support whatever you decide," he told her. "But I think you deserve to know your family." So Emily took another leap of faith. She sent Daniel and Laura each a message, explaining everything with care and humility. Days passed in silence. She braced herself for rejection, but the reply came, first from Laura. "Hi, Emily. I won't lie. This is a lot to process, but it's not your fault. And if you're open to it, I'd really like to meet you." Daniel's message followed the next day. "I'm shocked, but also curious. You're part of this family, whether we knew it before or not. Let's talk." It was more than Emily had hoped for. The truth, once hidden in the shadows, was now lighting the path ahead. The family she never knew was beginning to welcome her into their lives. But the most emotional moment was still to come. James asked her gently, "Would you be willing to meet me in person?" Emily hesitated only a moment before saying yes. Plane tickets were booked. A weekend in Oregon. A chance to stand face to face with the man who had unknowingly given her life. As she packed her bag, she looked at a photo of her and Richard on her dresser. She smiled. "I'm not replacing you," she whispered. "I'm just finding the rest of myself." The plane descended through a layer of soft Oregon clouds, revealing a patchwork of pine forests and winding rivers below. Emily sat by the window, hands clenched in her lap, staring out at the unfamiliar landscape. Her heart raced with 1,000 questions. What if it's awkward? What if it's disappointing? What if I cry the moment I see him? Waiting in the terminal with a handmade sign that simply read, "Emily," James stood motionless. He'd arrived an hour early, pacing, checking his watch, rehearsing what to say. His daughter, the daughter he never knew he had, was about to walk through those automatic doors. Emily's suitcase wheels rolled across the polished floor. She looked up, and their eyes locked. Time seemed to pause. There was no dramatic music, no speech prepared. Just 2 people, connected by blood, separated by decades, looking at one another as though seeing themselves for the first time. James dropped the sign. "Hi," Emily said softly, her voice cracking. He stepped forward. "Hi, sweetheart." She didn't hesitate. She walked into his arms. James held her tightly, and Emily let the tears fall. Not just for the time lost, but for the miracle of this moment, for the man who, in another life, might have been there for every scraped knee, every graduation, every broken heart. And still, he was here now. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I didn't know. I should have known. I would have." She pulled back and shook her head. "You're here. That's all that matters." They spent the rest of the day together. No cameras, no interruptions, just quiet conversations over coffee, a walk along a river trail, exchanging stories like puzzle pieces falling into place. Emily asked about his childhood. He told her how he grew up with strict parents, how the firehouse had become his second home, how much he regretted losing touch with her mother. She told him about Richard, about growing up dancing in the kitchen with her dad, and about the moment the DNA test changed everything. James introduced her to his wife, Margaret, a warm, welcoming woman who embraced Emily with open arms. "I've heard so much about you these past few weeks," she said. James hasn't stopped talking. The next day, Emily met her half-siblings. Laura, tall and poised, wrapped her in a hug the second they met. "I've always wanted a sister," she whispered. Daniel, more reserved, offered a handshake that quickly turned into a hug. "You're family now," he said simply. They spent the evening around a bonfire in James's backyard, roasting marshmallows and flipping through photo albums. James showed Emily pictures of herself from online, ones he had printed out. "You look so much like your grandmother when you smile," he said, eyes misty. "It wasn't perfect. How could it be? There were still gaps, still grief for what could have been, but there was also laughter, hope, healing." On her last night there, James gave her a small box. Inside was a silver locket, old, slightly tarnished, but beautiful. "It belonged to your grandmother," he said. "She would have loved you." Emily placed it around her neck. "Thank you," she said, her voice full of emotion. "For this, for everything." They hugged again, a deeper hug this time, not just meeting, connecting, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt whole. Emily returned home with her heart fuller than it had ever been. Her suitcase carried a few souvenirs from Oregon, the locket, a framed photo with James and her half-siblings, and a notebook filled with stories James had shared with her. But it was her spirit that had truly changed. The girl who had taken a DNA test just for fun had uncovered a truth that shattered her world and then helped rebuild it. One of the first things she did upon returning was visit Richard. He sat in his favorite armchair reading the newspaper, just like he always did. Emily knelt beside him, her eyes filled with the quiet strength she had gained. "I found him," she said. Richard didn't need clarification. He set the newspaper down and reached for her hand. "I'm proud of you," he said. "You deserve to know." Tears welled in her eyes. "I want you to know, nothing changes how I feel about you. You'll always be my dad." He smiled, his voice thick with emotion. "And you'll always be my little girl." The healing between them was quiet but powerful. The kind of healing that doesn't need grand gestures, just truth, just love. In the months that followed, Emily stayed in touch with James, Laura, and Daniel. They texted regularly, shared photos, exchanged recipes. Slowly, the bond deepened. What began as polite conversations grew into daily check-ins, heartfelt confessions, and genuine affection. At Christmas, James and Margaret came to visit. They brought gifts, but more importantly, they brought presents. James joined Richard at the dinner table, two fathers, two versions of the same role, sharing a meal in peace. There were no awkward silences, only laughter, understanding, a quiet agreement that love can take many forms. Richard even toasted to new beginnings. "Life throws us some surprises," he said, raising his glass, "but sometimes those surprises bring more love than we ever imagined." Emily looked around the table, at the man who raised her, the father she had just found, the siblings who felt like lifelong friends, and the mother who finally exhaled the weight of her secret. And she realized, this was family, imperfect, unexpected, beautiful. Over the next year, Emily and James began a project together, a memory book for her future children, filled with stories from both sides of her family tree, photos of firehouses and ballet recitals, letters from Richard and James, pages filled with laughter, with truth, with the kind of love that endures beyond biology. The pain of what was lost didn't disappear, but it no longer ruled her. In its place grew acceptance, gratitude, and something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Emily often looked at the locket around her neck, imagining the woman who once wore it, a grandmother she never knew, but who now felt close. And every time she caught her reflection, she saw not confusion or sadness, but a woman who had found her roots, embraced her truth, and chose to love more deeply because of it. Because sometimes the most powerful discoveries don't just change your life, they expand your heart. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more emotional, true DNA journeys to life. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new story that might just change the way you see family.